Je suis plutôt sûr que ça vous a surpris de voir ces personnes déguisées en animaux. Parce que oui, ce sont des personnes, pas de vrais animaux. Ces personnes se font appeler les furries. Et je dois vous avouer que moi aussi, j'étais plutôt surpris la première fois que j'en ai vu. Mais par chance, ici même au Québec, nous avons un des plus grands experts en furie qui a pu m'éclairer sur ce genre de phénomène, le docteur Croteau.
So I'm Dr. Courtney Plante. I'm a social psychologist, and I specialize in fan research. So I study why people are fans of things. I study Star Wars, anime, science fiction fans, My Little Pony fans, and furries, among just a few groups. I've been studying them for the last 12 or 13 years now, and I've studied more than 40,000 furries from 70 different countries. And I'm a professor here at Bishop's University.
Le docteur Plante a déjà été interviewé par de nombreux autres documentaristes et il m'a permis de beaucoup mieux savoir qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un furry.
So a furry is a person who is a fan. So Star Wars fans are fans of Star Wars, science fiction fans are fans of science fiction. Furries are people who are fans of any TV show or story that has walking, talking animal characters, so like this bird. So an animal that walks and talks and does human things.
Et disons juste que bâtir un pan de sa personnalité autour d'une œuvre culturelle, ben je comprends. Mais je sais ce que vous vous disiez. Comment est-ce que tout ça a pu commencer? D'où est-ce que ça vient? Qu'est-ce qui a pu amener des personnes à se déguiser en animaux?
So furry became popular at the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s. So they're sort of an offshoot of the science fiction fandom. So science fiction conventions happened all the time in the 1970s. And then at these science fiction conventions, there would always be a few people who would meet up to tell stories about, what if you crash landed on a planet full of animals? What would that be like? And so enough of those people used to meet up at science fiction conventions that they said, let's just start our own convention. And so eventually they started their own convention at the end of the 1970s. It didn't get too big for a little while. For about a decade, it stayed pretty small. Unless you knew a furry or you were on furry mailing lists, you didn't really have a way to get in. But then in the 1990s, with the internet, it became much easier to accidentally stumble upon furries. You'd be looking for fan artwork and suddenly you would find a whole bunch of furry arts and you realize there's a local furry group. So I guess the 90s would be when it got really big, when it exploded in popularity because it was easier to find. And nowadays, it's bigger than ever.
Mais je dois vous avouer que quand j'ai découvert à propos du phénomène furie, je trouvais ça un peu étrange. Il a fallu que j'en apprenne un peu plus afin de comprendre qu'il n'y avait rien de bizarre. Malheureusement, au début de cette pratique, les mentalités étaient beaucoup plus fermées.
So at the very beginning, furries were sort of looked at as being weird. So this is kind of weird. You don't see this very often. So I think people who don't know what this is all about, they see this and they go, well, this is very strange. And so when humans are like natural psychologists, when we see something we don't understand, we need to explain it. And so when you see a furry, you think, okay, why is that person behaving so weird? And we tend to assume that either there's something weird in their head or that it's some weird kink fetish thing. And so that's what a lot of people thought at the beginning. And so for years that was kind of the popular idea that, oh, that must be what a furry is. And it perception changed after a few years, but in the first few years in the 1990s, 2000s, a lot of media stories about furries played into that. No one really thought to go ask a furry what this is all about, so they just kind of made up some stuff that, oh, these are people who think they're animals, or these are people who have a weird fetish. There was a famous episode of the show CSI that did an episode about furries where they got the story totally wrong. And so at the beginning it wasn't terribly kind to furries.
Mais le Dr Plante reste optimiste par rapport à la communauté furry et espère que le mouvement continuera à s'agrandir au fil du temps.
Yeah, so I think looking to the future, furry is going to just get more and more popular, more mainstream. So 20 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago, if you were a Lord of the Rings fan, you were part of a really small, nerdy group. You know, it wasn't very popular. But then the Lord of the Rings movies came out, and it became huge. Star Wars was always kind of big, but it kind of settled down and went away for a few decades. And then with the new Star Wars movies, it became very popular again. Same thing with the Marvel movies and comic books. So I think furry is going in that direction. I think movies like Zootopia, Disney's Zootopia came out a few years ago, and it was very popular in the general population. So I think most people liked it, and I think every time a movie like that comes out, we get a whole bunch of new furries in the fandom. So I think with more and more of those kinds of movies, more and more people make it into the furry fandom, and so it'll just get bigger and more mainstream until eventually being a furry is no different than being a Star Wars fan or a comic books fan. Also, the technology that goes into these suits gets better and better every year. In the future, I think you'll see a lot more electronics going into these suits. We're already seeing suits where the whole head has like blinking eyes and electric hair and digital screens and stuff. So lots of cool stuff with technology.
En résumé, une personne reste une personne, peu importe ce qu'elle fait dans ses temps libres, que ce soit de se déguiser en animaux ou d'écouter Interstellar, encore, et encore, et encore. Donc la prochaine fois que vous voyez un furry, au lieu d'avoir peur ou de trouver ça étrange, faites-lui un câlin.